Hello and welcome to the Connected Intelligence Spotlight. So in this episode we're going to take a look at the evolving state of technology ecosystems that are currently dominated by Apple and Google. While these may seem unshakable and here for the long run, it's worth starting with a little look at the pre-smartphone world to understand how a seismic change in product innovation can have a fundamental impact on the status quo. And with that in mind, let's take a look at Nokia, which used to dominate the mobile phone market. Not only did Nokia control more than 50% of the global phone sales, it was also a leader in innovation. It launched the first mobile-based app store in 2007, a music service the next year, and in subsequent years was trialing image recognition, facial recognition, and even augmented reality, long before other companies were really focused on these areas. And yes, when we look at the company's market share over these same years, the collapse is astonishing. Now, partially this is due to the launch of Apple's iPhone, of course, which took share away from Nokia. But 2010 was the real beginning of the Nokia crash, and that was caused not by the iPhone's launch, but because of Nokia's decision to adopt Windows Mobile as its new platform. While Nokia continued to innovate and came up with some pretty leading concepts, the app community failed to jump onto this new OS, causing consumers in turn to abandon Nokia and of course Windows Mobile to get the latest and greatest apps that were being created for iOS and Android. Now that may seem like an ancient history lesson, but the underlying lesson that choosing the wrong platform can cost you a lot of business is still highly relevant today, because we may be looking at another seismic shift in consumer focus as voice assistants move well and truly into the mainstream market. So let's set the base expectations and look at consumer tech ownership overall. Our ecosystem report we published earlier this year shows that 88% of homes have at least one smartphone in them, hardly a surprise. And streaming media players are, for example, in 46% of internet-connected homes. That's not bad when you consider that 31% of US homes don't get true broadband speeds today. Now, if we were to put a specific smartphone OS in the center rather than just the home, either Android or iOS, what we would see is an increased loyalty to the vendor's ecosystem, whether that's an iPhone in the center driving adoption of Apple TV or Android driving the adoption of Chromebooks and tablets. Which makes sense. Apple and Google have worked hard to create a tight synergy between tablets, smartphones and other devices, as well as the services such as streaming services, to create a natural hardware first or OS first bond to build a more comprehensive ecosystem. Where it gets more interesting is when we look at the voice assistant, putting the assistant in the center of the ecosystem. What we can see in this chart is that there are significant increases in tech adoption across all categories compared to the average connected household. The greatest lift comes in home automation. Again, makes sense. Telling your assistant to turn on your smart lights is far easier than fumbling in your pocket for your phone to take the same action. But the key here is that all aspects of tech see growth. After all, once you start using a voice assistant, you become far more focused on making sure all of your tech works seamlessly with it. Now, it's easy to make a chicken and egg argument here, that tech adoption is higher overall because the consumers buying assistants are more tech-leading consumers in the first place. It's not necessarily true though. Voice assistants are often bundled as promotional offers when you sign up for broadband access or other services, meaning that a broad range of consumers are jumping onto the assistant trend. What we do see is a broad distribution across age and gender, but with a bias towards higher incomes, which can help drive that increased tech spend. But that future tech spend, as we mentioned, will be focused on ensuring that additional product purchases work well first with their voice assistant, which is a fundamental shift from today's smartphone first mindset. That could potentially lead to a change in ecosystem status quo over time. That's our spotlight. Thanks for joining.